Interestingly enough, as we've done that over the years, I have noticed that there are actually more women, assuming that they're wives, that follow us more than some of the men. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think what it's telling of is the fact that women who want to see their male figures, their husbands, step up and be the men that God has called them to be. That doesn't mean dominate. That doesn't mean male chauvinism, nothing like that. It really just means, hey, they are yearning for a desire for a godly man to impact their life.
Today, many in the church are keenly aware of the masculine crisis, where a generation of men have been shamed for masculinity. Many churches want to respond by starting their own men's ministry, but struggle to understand where to begin and how to sustain it. Today on the Next Stage podcast, Rob Stout sits down with Tristan Johnson, founder and executive director of Elite Men's Ministry, a Denver-based organization consulting to churches to help develop and sustain their own local men's ministries. Tristan also serves at Word of Life Christian Center in Lone Tree, Colorado. The Next Stage Podcast for Men is a bi-weekly audio and video podcast helping a man live a life of purpose, born out of his identity as a man created in God's image. For more information about Rob Stout, the Next Stage Podcast, or Sherpa Unlimited, see the show notes or visit sherpaunlimited.com/podcast. Welcome to the Next Stage.
Men, welcome to the Next Stage. And Tristan Johnson, thank you for joining us. So glad that you're here today.
Yeah, great to be here with you, and looking forward to what we're going to lean into today. Seems like an exciting.
I'm super excited, man, and we're just going to dive right in. And I just want to start with your story. So every movement begins with a personal moment when someone realizes that there is a need. Probably starts with them. And then it has outward vision to it. But starting with you, what was the moment that you saw the light in your life and you're like, I need to be an elite man? Could you share that story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, it was really coming to a realization that after my opportunity to pursue a professional football career, and I'm talking NFL now, I'm not talking like the sub-junior leagues or anything, as that was coming to an end through injury and just different things I know I couldn't carry on with, I hit a crossroads, and I think most men have done that. They hit a crossroads where they have to decide if they're going to go left or go right. And, for years in my life, that had been the platform, the structure through sports, right? You're working out, the discipline, the being coached, and all that good stuff. That was the structure of my life. But I had hit the crossroads once I knew things were coming to an end. And so I thought, well, I know I got to do something. I know who my identity in Christ is because I grew up in church, but I either got to own this thing or I'm just going to be coasting through life, and who knows where it's going to take me. So I think that's really what ignited the fire for me. I knew I had purpose. I knew I was called to do something, but just kind of transitioning out of maybe more of a secular type platform through sports and coming into more of a ministry type platform to really fulfill purpose is kind of where it started for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those of us who don't have a pro sports career or even a college career, could you run us through that a little bit? You pursued playing pro football, right?
Yeah. It's definitely a different world, and it's a much different world now than it was even back when I was playing. But I think the biggest difference I noted was that transition from the collegiate level to the pro. I mean, the speed of the game obviously is faster, and you meet guys who are just as good as you were when you were in high school and had all the awards and stuff. But now They treat it as a business. You know what I'm saying? Like that's their livelihood, So them coming downhill to hit you at 20 miles an hour and they weigh, 100 pounds more than you, that's how they feed their family, or that's their livelihood. And so you really get your eyes opened up pretty quickly to how much of a business it is at the pro level as opposed to college, where, there's some things you can kind of lean on to that are going to be better than different guys. You might be faster, or you might be stronger, you might be taller, but when you get to the pro level, you can throw all that out the window because you got guys that are just like that, if not better, and they're coming to take your head off so they can feed your family.
Oh yeah, like they're all great. Like everybody's fast, everybody's the best of the best. Yeah, you're playing with the 0.01%, right? So
Definitely.
that's awesome. Tell the story about, and we had a call prior to this. You heard a story from a pastor about the 300.
I did. Yeah. So
and it really shaped your life. Can you share that?
It did. Yeah, it had a profound impact on me. And I think, honestly, Rob, I've listened to that same sermon probably at least once a year minimum since I've heard it. And it's been 21 years now that I've been with the church. So my pastor, Dr. Tim Bagwell, shout out to him if he's listening right now or finds this and begins to listen, had a pretty profound impact in me around 2007. So again, I'm kind of realizing that the pro football thing isn't going to work. And again, I grew up in church, but really kind of lost some of that in college, to be honest with you. Wasn't going to church or getting plugged into any of the collegiate mechanisms for your spiritual life. And so fast forward, I graduate, figure out that, pro football is not going to work. And the first thing I remember coming home was, hey, I got to get plugged back into a church, and I want to stay in a church and just really grow myself. So I get involved in Word of Life Christian Center, meet Dr. Bagwell, start to become familiar with his ministry. And at the time he preached this message, I want to say it was around the summer of 2007. And this was kind of when, like the Russell Crowe movies were coming out about the 300 and the Spartans and all that. And it's a real kind of gritty time for, guys are watching.
It was a good era for movies, man. There's no doubt.
Totally. Yeah, totally a great era. A lot of people were into that stuff. But anyway, I think he leveraged that theme into the story of Gideon, right, in Judges 6 and 7, where he's talking about how Gideon was the least of his tribe and, kind of the least of his family. And all of a sudden, the angel speaks to him and says, "You mighty man of valor." And Gideon's like, "What are you talking about? If you're such a great God, why are my people left out? This, that, and the other." And so he laid this story out pretty good for us. But I think what caught my attention was the fact that even though Gideon did have kind of all these factors that were against him, right? Like he was the least of his tribe. He was the least of this, least of that, pity patty party, poor me story, like go read through it, right? He was still able to be raised up. I can't say get raised up. I guess God only raises people up, but he was able to be raised up by God and used to just turn a whole nation around. And he did it with like torches and lights, right? Like that was profound to me. Like, wow, I mean, the guy just said yes to God, and God used some of the most creative mechanisms out there to raise him up to be a leader. And that caught my attention. And I have a rule in life, kind of like when I hear something, if it's nice and it doesn't stick with me, then it's probably just something that I thought was great. But then this kind of like stuck with me. Like I remember having nights where I just woke up thinking about it. Wow, what a cool story. And then he talked about, of course, how when he was choosing his men, his elite fighting force, these were men who were vigilant, they were watchful, they were always on cue for God. And God even put a test in place, right? Like, hey, men who lap the water but are still looking out over the river, those are the ones you want, as opposed to guys who are just like, oh, man, I'm just happy to be around some water. I can drink. I'm hydrated for the day. Wow, I'm great. And they were just drinking water. And it was just very clear and distinct how he laid that story out through the Bible. And it's been with me ever since, and been 21 years now in the ministry. So it's great.
I love that. There are some formative voices. And my assumption is we're framing this entire episode around passivity versus leadership and how that impacts culture. Yeah. But you probably recognize some ways in your life where you're like, hey, I'm coming out of, pursuing a very aggressive sport. And how do I fight passivity in my own life? How do I engage that? Is that accurate? Like, how do I move forward?
Yeah, I totally think it's accurate, and it's true for most guys if they're being honest with themselves, if they've had that path. Anytime that you are getting into a point where you can gain some notoriety, people begin to know your name, especially where I played, which was a small town environment, and that's all they know, right? So like if you're the star of that town based on your football career, people know who you are. But then when all that goes away, you start realizing how you got to get back to some of the basics in life, and that's definitely what happened to me. So
that's cool. So what happened after that? You formed Elite Men's Ministry, but how did that happen? And tell us what Elite stands for. I love that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Elite stands for Enriching Lives into Eternity. And the unique thing about Elite is, as I mentioned, my pastor was preaching the sermon and he kept referring to this 300 that God was raising up through Gideon to be an elite fighting force because of some of the traits they had to make sure that they were protecting the plan and purpose of God to deliver the Israelites at the time. And so elite kind of stuck with me.
So yeah, the idea that we're hanging this whole episode is this idea that passive men produce broken cultures, but when men lead with purpose, families and communities flourish. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. And so that's what you recognize in your own life. You're like, hey, listen, I want to form Elite Men's Ministry. Let's dig into that. But first, before we do that, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk to you men about how you can be a catalyst in your church, in your men's group, in your business group. We're going to listen to something and then we're going to come right back and hear more about Elite Men's Ministry. We'll be right back. This is Rob Stout, host of the Next Stage podcast. If you're like a lot of men I talk to, you're working hard, you're providing for your family, checking the boxes, and all of those things you're supposed to do, but you're still wondering, is this really what I'm here for? Is this all there is? Believe me, you're not alone. And honestly, that's not how it's supposed to be. I believe that every man is called to live with purpose, one that flows out of his identity, out of who he is, not just what he does. That's why I speak at churches, at men's groups, and business associations about how to live with purpose born out of identity so that you can lead, provide, and live with clarity and conviction. Here's my ask. Would you reach out to your pastor, your men's group leader, or your business association and tee up a conversation between me and that leader to invite me in to that group to speak about some of these critical issues? Because believe me, if you're asking these questions, every man around you is asking those as well. So together, let's equip men to step into who they are, who they were meant to be at work, at home, and in life. Because when a man finds his purpose, everything changes. So reach out to your pastor, your men's group leader, or your business association and simply connect them with me through an email. My email is thenextstage@sherpaunlimited.com. And as a thank you, I want to give you a signed copy of my book, Getting Even, Countering Life's Hard Knocks. Let's partner together. Reach out, connect me with that leader, and get your free book. Thank you. Hey, man, welcome back to the Next Stage podcast. We're here with Tristan Johnson of Elite Men's Ministry. And Tristan, tell us about what Elite Men's Ministry does. What do you do and how do you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me give you some context. So I think before we start talking about Elite, one of the biggest problems we try to address is I think there's a void of leadership, right? And so when you think about leadership, I've heard Dr. John Maxwell say it this way. He says, everything rises and falls on leadership. And then, of course, you can go into the Bible and you can look at examples of leaders that God raised up. Judges would be a good set of books to read. But similar to the story of Gideon, the Israelites at that time were looking for leadership. You know, they had heard the great stories about how Moses had delivered them and how Joshua came behind Moses to help lead the people into the promised land. And so there's always kind of been this societal need for leadership. Who's going to lead the way? Who's going to show me what God wants to do? And so that's the problem ultimately we're trying to solve at Elite is we want to make sure that we raise up men specifically in the church to be leaders. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean be a leader of the church or succeed the pastor, whatever from a church perspective. It really means being a leader in a 360-degree, nature, right? Be a leader at home, be a leader in your community, be a leader in your workplace. Everywhere you go, you should ooze leadership. And I think that's what being elite is all about. When you think about sports, again, as we've talked earlier, there's the elite coaches of the world, right? Like you've got all these Super Bowl winning coaches, but then you've got the Bill Belichick's who win 7 or 6. Then you've got all the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, but then you've got the Tom Brady's that win 7. So what is the difference between a coach who wins a Super Bowl or somebody that does something great and then somebody who does it elite at an elite level? And what I have found is that, it's the consistency and it's all the principles we learn in the Bible, right? Being submitted to God, being submitted to his will, being prayerful, leading, humility, all those things that we talk about that are the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians are traits of what it means to be elite. So I've tried to run with that and really try to personify that through our ministry and certainly try to model it myself at home.
Man, I love that. And with that is this idolatry that our culture has with fame and platform. And if you don't have that, then you don't count. And if anything is true, it is that every place in God's kingdom counts. It counts that you are a world-class diaper changer and dishwasher and servant to your family, and nobody sees it, and nobody writes, hey, man, best job helping my kid ride a bike. That counts, though. That is elite, as well as pushing as hard as you can in your job and say, man, we've got this quota, we've got this mountain to climb, we've got all of these goals on the corporate side of things, but man, it all counts. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
the things
definitely
that are seen, the things that are not seen, right? And it starts with
absolutely.
character, and it starts at home. So
Yeah, you make a great point because I think, from a societal perspective, a lot of men think just being a dad is like thankless, right? And I got to be honest with you, there are some days where it feels empty, right?
it
You're
is.
taking care of the kids
Yeah.
and you're making the money or you're splitting that with your wife, however you do it. And you come home and you're just exhausted. You're just like drained from just being yourself. You're just being dad. But you have to understand that even just those little things, as you were just alluding to, those things make a big difference.
Well, I had a friend of mine who told me about being gone on a business trip all week. His wife was home with their 4 kids. Got home on Friday night. I'm like, so what'd you do? And he goes, I got home. I sent my kids to the park. I sat down. I gave my wife a foot rub and I made dinner. And I was like, good deal. And he goes, and I expected nothing in return. He goes, you know what I'm saying? He kind of gave me the wink. I'm like, oh, I know what you're saying. Believe me, dude, I've been on road trips before. But I was
Yeah,
like, you know what? Serving at home, being like a servant to our family and a servant to our kids, it's where it starts, man. That's great stuff. That's good
absolutely.
stuff. Cool.
Absolutely.
So let's dig into the X's and O's of what you do. How are you developing leaders? How are you developing ministries and churches? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So for us, I think it really gets down to basics in terms of just that one on one, kind of like we're having now, right? Like being able to sit down with a man over a cup of coffee, some food. Food's always a good common denominator for men, right? So if I can sit down, look a guy in his eye, and just really hear his heart and where he's coming from, that's typically the catalyst and that's where it starts. Now, I know that in today's modern church, a lot of men look at men's ministry over, certain little programmatic mechanisms that we've had, right? Like a men's breakfast is always a good staple. It's food. You've got a lot of men around and you're being guys, right? You don't have to worry about the women eavesdropping or the children bugging you for a quarter to go play a video game or for the bubble gum machine, whatever. You're just being a guy over some food talking with other guys, right? It's simple. It's
Yeah.
easy. It makes sense. The problem with that is that it creates a group environment where most men aren't necessarily comfortable sharing their heart. And what I mean by that is like, Rob, if I told you about a certain issue going on in my life, that's one on one. That's very personal, right? So there's that
Right.
personal element to it to where I've got your full undivided attention and I can really share my heart. If I'm sitting at a group of, 12 guys at a round breakfast table, like we might talk about superficial stuff like, hey, who's got the best cheeseburger in town? Or, who are you rooting for this weekend? Who's your team? Where are you from? And those are all good questions, but it really doesn't dive into the heart of what's going on in the man. And so we try to not necessarily steer away from some of those things because you need that community and you need that fellowship, but we really try to get up close and personal and figure out, hey, where are you at as a man? Like, what's going on with you and how can we help you? And so that's where it starts. And then I think the other part of it is then to give them some structure and really give them structure within realizing what the Word of God says about them. And that's where I have also found that a lot of men miss it. They go to church with their families if they attend church, and it's almost like they go on autopilot Sunday. They just figure as long as they're there with their wife and their kids and they're in the pew with them and they're hearing a great message, they're set. And then they get to start all over again on Monday. We really try to take that and say, okay, we know what you heard on Sunday. Let's take that and you now take ownership of it. You become a leader of that, right? If the pastor's telling you, hey, pray with your wife more, what did you actually do to pray with your wife more that week?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you
I
start,
love that.
well,
Well,
it's great.
sure, and you're right, and the reality of you and I meeting at some function or in the lobby at church, we run into each other, give each other a big hug. I'm like, "How you doing, man? I'm great," And then there's a context, and I drop something really personal, or like I need somebody more than just the bro hug, and dapping somebody up. It's like, but there's no safe context for that. There's no confidential context for that.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm like, hey, listen, dude, I'm really struggling. Like, I got to have a safe place for that, And so creating those contexts is just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you never want to assume too, with a guy like, you might talk about the safe havens and the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
They may not have that at home. Guys might be afraid to open up to their wife and say, hey, I lost a job today. I don't know what to tell her, or hey,
Right.
I am having some physical issues that I would normally only discuss with my doctor, but I don't have a doctor right now. So I got to talk to my wife. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that some men just aren't comfortable or safe talking about those things. And you can never assume that they have that through a spouse or through a family member. And so that's where I think we come in to really help with some coaching and just some different things and how they can communicate. And I know we'll talk about some of that stuff later, but I mean, really just creating that safe haven for men to be men, like just be a guy, be who you were created to be. We really try to personify that through Elite and
Yeah.
showed you how to be elite in just being yourself.
I love that. I love that. And I've said, and this is, I think this is more than just a, kind of a pot shot at churches, but I think churches underserve men, and here's why. They want them to give time and money, get there, and be good. So it's like, okay, so you want me to give financially? I understand that's part of my role. You want me to give time and service. You want me to get there and be in attendance and then be good. But what's proactive? Like the wheels fall off a guy's life and they're like, oh, Tristan, man, did you hear what happened?
Yeah.
Well, what proactively is going on? I don't do that with my body. Like I'm in the gym like 4 or 5 days a week. I'm training, I'm doing, and so the same thing with men. When men fall, everybody suffers. My friend in Uganda, he said, listen, man, when men are healthy, the entire village is healthy. And that's true. I mean, I've seen that in my own life. And so way to go, man. Way to dig in with guys at that level.
Absolutely.
So, men, here's the point that we're talking about is that passive men produce broken cultures. But when men lead with purpose, families, churches, communities, countries prosper. I'd encourage you to reach out to Tristan and find out about some of the tools that he has got to be able to plug into your ministry. And we're going to put that information in the show notes, and men can reach out to you and get a hold of you. So
Absolutely.
it's cool. Tristan, let me kind of shift gears for a second here. So as a leader, you know as well as I do that information alone does not change people. I mean, we live in one of the most information saturated times in history. The height of, the digital age, maybe it's not, maybe it's just beginning, but it's the highest point that it has been, but it's also one of the highest levels of reported loneliness, depression, hopelessness, and even suicide. And the male rate of suicide is 4 times that of women. Information isn't the problem. Transformation is.
Yeah.
I would love if you could share a story of what you've actually seen in men's lives, maybe a specific story. Don't use names, please, but share a story of a man's life that has been changed as a result of what you're doing. Would love to hear something like that.
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much for letting me share my heart here, because this is definitely,
man.
We were talking earlier where this could be a little bit of the emotional side of the call for those listening. But there was a young man I encountered several years ago. And I guess I should say I've re-encountered him because, I did some coaching after my pro career just to kind of fill that bucket still. So I went off and did some coaching at the high school level and some kind of independent league level here locally. And there was a young man that I came across that just had great skills, very, very much reminded me of me, or that prototypical person who's got all the skill set in the world. But then when you dive deeper and peel back the layers, structure wasn't quite there. So, had a great skill set, was very fast, could run every route I put him on the field. But as I got to know him, he lost his dad. So there were some structural issues, right? He's coping with loss. He's grieving. And so usually when that happens in a man's life or anybody's life, that's a tragic event, right? Like you don't get over that overnight, especially if it's a parent or if it's somebody that you're really close to. And so as I dove in more and began to get to know this young man, he got to a point to where he was actually diagnosed to be a manic depressant. Like he was on meds, and I mean, you name it. He was on just about anything you can prescribe these days. And somehow, he felt comfortable talking to me. And that's probably only through God's grace and the anointing I have on my life. But as I got to know the young man, he didn't seem to be really clear on what the word said about him and what God said about him. And I said, hey, man, you're on these meds and you're telling me about all these side effects you have. Have you ever opened the Bible to see what God has to say about that kind of stuff? And he's like, well, God talks about medicine in the Bible? I said, yeah, man, every word in the Bible is an answer to life for us. We just got to open it and read it. And so that was like the first aha moment for him, is like, wow, if I just actually read the Bible and read it, it can give me some answers. And of course, you dove into his background a little bit more and had the Catholic upbringing and some mixed messages with a fragmented family on faith and spirituality and all that stuff. But just getting him to open the Bible and read it was a game changer. And then the more he started doing that, the first thing I did is I said, hey, man, let's get you into a local church and let's get you serving. So now, not only was he enlightened from information from the Word of God, but he got to serving, and that fulfilled purpose. That essentially replaced football for him. And it was exactly what happened to me. And so here I am having to not just model what I'm telling him about, I got to live it too because I had the experience. So because you think, had I not have had that experience with him, he might still be on meds. He might still be depressed. He might still even be at a point where he's now thinking about taking his life or whatever the case may be. So again, it's those little things, man. Opening a Bible, serving in your local church, transformed his life. And those are two simple things on the larger scale of things we could be involved in, right? So I hope that helps. But that's a story that stands out to me because it was powerful. I was like, wow.
Way to go, man. And here's the thing. It's your social media was probably not there. There was not a film crew. Nobody's writing about this online. Sports Center's not there. But you were at the place where another young man needed you. Those two lives intersect, and it changes this guy's trajectory. I mean, that is so important. Men, passive men, and this is what we're talking about, passive men versus men who take leadership and men who step into those spaces. Passive men produce broken cultures, and then broken cultures compound upon themselves, and it creates generational brokenness. And this is not a rich thing or poor thing. This is not a U.S. thing versus around the world thing. This does not wear a political hat or an ethnicity hat. This is just human nature.
Yeah.
But when men step into leadership, men step into wholeness, men step into healing in their lives, everything changes. Like families, trajectories, communities start to change. I love that. So thanks, Tristan. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
That's cool. And you guys are also developing leaders. What are some of the tools that you have available that you're using in leadership development to help develop churches and things like that?
Yeah. So one of the things when it comes to the local church that we've come to realize over the years is that just like anything in society, you have to kind of adapt to your circumstances. Now, the Bible is very clear when it says, we live in this world, but we're not of the world. And so the church struggles with that too, just like we would as humans, right? And so many churches are over-programmed and take a programmatic approach as far as making their operations run, but they're very underdeveloped when it comes to men. And when I say underdeveloped, I'm talking about pure discipleship at its core, right? Being able to get with another man or another individual, open the word and say, this is how you read Genesis 1:1. This is how you read John 1:1, whatever the case may be. And so in learning that, what we have learned is that there's power in partnership. And what that means is that when you partner with someone, you have to be able to understand that there's things that you do well and there's other things that somebody else may do well. How can you put those together and make something really, really beautiful, just like a marriage, right? We're both married men. My wife does some things a lot better than I do. So I allow her to run or take the lead in that area, and probably vice versa with you, right? So being able to have the ability to recognize that. We do the same with the church. And so what we've got to do is provide structure, right? Most guys like structure. They like purpose. They want to be a part of something. And so what we've done is we've partnered strategically with two ministries here locally, where one, MMC, Men's Ministry Catalyst, helps us with a framework in order to be able to implement like a 6-part leadership framework that you can apply individually or in a group setting. And all the principles are the same. They're biblical, godly principles to where if you want to start a men's ministry at your church, you can. Or if you just want to get more serious about what you're doing as a man in your sphere of influence, you can apply these same principles to that. And then the second partnership is the National Coalition of Ministries to Men. This is now getting you in more of a group setting, group environment where there's a community of men that are experiencing the same thing you are. So, when you've looked at problems in your ministry and your business and you thought, man, am I the only one that's going through this? You can make a
Mm.
phone call to another guy or another member and say, hey, have you ever experienced with this? And I guarantee you 100% of the time, they're going to answer your call or respond to your email, however you choose to communicate, and say, yeah, man, I dealt with that. Let me tell you how it worked out for me. And then what that does now is that kind of disarms that lack of safe haven we were talking about earlier. It puts you in a community of men who are just like you, dealing with the same thing, even though you think you are like isolated from that. And that, in my opinion, is definitely a trick of our enemy, right? He wants you to be in that isolated state of mind, that isolated set to say, hey, you're the only one going through this. Nobody else has ever been through this before. I'm going to beat you up psychologically, and then hopefully you'll do something to harm yourself. Whereas you just get around another community of men like Tristan, like Rob, like others, they'll tell you, hey, man, I went through that too. That sucked, but here's how God helped me overcome it. And so now it creates that community that makes you feel safe. You're in a safe haven, and you're allowed to be around other men who are pretty much dealing with the same thing you are.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, my sports career was not what yours was, but I am a team guy. I am strong around other strong players. And when I'm by myself, I'm not very good. In fact, I'm dangerous. But when I'm around other strong men, other strong guys who have that same mentality, gosh, I become strong, and I feed off of that. And that's a team mentality, man. We were not created to be alone. In fact, that's the first thing out of creation God said. The only thing that was not good was that Adam was alone. You know?
Yeah. Amen. Come on.
So I love that, man. I love that. In fact, you mentioned the National Coalition of Ministries to Men. You've got a conference coming up in November. And by the way, we're going to put all this stuff in the show notes so guys can digest all this stuff. But can you plug that? It's actually at your church at Word of Life Christian Center in Lone Tree, Colorado, part of Denver. But man, plug that thing, and then we're gonna help pump that up. We're gonna get there. I'm gonna be there for sure. No doubt.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you in November. But I think what's really exciting about bringing the conference to the church is that, typically when men think about going to conferences, right, you're having to travel, you're going to be at a convention center, you got to get a hotel, you got to get all that stuff logistically. Whereas with this conference, it's nice because we're bringing it to the local church. Word of Life happens to be positioned in an area of Denver that has a lot of visibility, right? It's South Denver. It's in a nice kind of affluent community. Big shopping malls, all the stuff that happens in Denver in normal life is there. I think Charles Schwab's corporation is kind of in that area. They move their operations from San Francisco to Colorado for a reason. So we're kind of in the epicenter of where things can happen. And so because we are bringing the conference to the local church, it's a conference unlike any other. Like you go to conferences and usually you're going to write down some notes and get some information. And, oh, that was nice. And yeah, maybe I'll subscribe to the email list of this person. This is not that. This is a true men's conference where it's authentic. We're going to unravel some issues that men maybe either don't talk about or are scared to talk about. We're going to give you some tools to be equipped to handle those issues. And then when you come away from that conference, there's two things that I'm praying that you leave with. Number one, you're going to leave with the framework of what it takes to be a leader, not just in your local men's ministry or your church, but at home. But you're also going to walk away knowing that, hey, you can be the man that God has created you to be, because that is a picture that I think most men have just lost. Like they don't even think they can be what God has created them to be, and unfortunately we're in a society where they've really minimized the role of men as far as it being critical to how society functions. But when you peel back some of the layers, man, the role of a man is more critical today, real time, like right now during this conversation, than it's ever been in history. I'm totally convinced of that. I'm so convinced of that I'd be willing to take that to some of our more talked about circles that we probably won't talk about on this call and really make that case, because that's powerful. The role of a man in society today is more critical than it's ever been, period. End of story. I'm convinced of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Haril Kazindra, I quote him again from Musana, when men are healthy, the entire village is healthy. We had an author, Nancy Piercy, who's an apologist. She's a professor, but she wrote a book called The Toxic War on Masculinity. I would encourage you to, number one, read that book, because it outlines the war on masculinity that's gone on since the colonial ages on, how our culture has changed, and the idea that being a man is A, predatorial, or B, useless. And probably because there were predatory men who didn't live out their calling to be godly men. that this attack came. But man, it's like there are guys who are like, am I of any value? Like, do I even need to be here? So I love what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic. I can't wait to get there, number one, and to link arms with you and do more stuff together. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to get real. And I'm not saying that to scare guys who are listening to this or anybody listening to this, but I think there's some elements of ministry that you can kind of coast through, right? Like going to church, going through certain things. This is going to be pretty hands-on. I mean, man, I'm excited about it. We've been praying about it every month since we know that we've landed the conference here, and it's just going to be exciting. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing you in November, but certainly just all the men who hear our hearts on this podcast and are really yearning for something like that. It's right here in Lone Tree, Colorado, and we're looking forward to it. Excited to have everybody come out.
I love it. And here's the thing: when a lot of women, even in the corporate world, hear that I do a men's podcast, they're like, "Whoa, man, this is like, oh no, this is anti-women. This is." And I'm like, "Whoa, stop! Please listen to anything we say, because when we get in a man's face and say, listen, your number one job is to love your wife as Christ loved the church." Your number one job is to give your life for her. Your number one job is to cultivate selflessness and give yourself to your children. And anything you hear us say, please, let's talk about it. I would love for you to be in the room when guys talk, because it's not what you think. I love it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I know, we were talking a little bit about the information age and social media. And, there's topics I've heard in the past when it comes to ministry to men about, the eye gate, the ear gate, and all these kind of entrances to your soul that our society is really trying to grip. And so with social media, it was unique because we took an interesting approach where we tried to really just overload our social media and our social outlets with godly content. To where not only if men are picking up their phone and scrolling during the day, they're reading good stuff if they plug into us. And interestingly enough, as we've done that over the years, I have noticed that there are actually more women, assuming that they're wives, that follow us more than some of the men. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think what it's telling of is the fact that women who want to see their male figures, their husbands, step up and be the men that God has called them to be. That doesn't mean dominate. That doesn't mean male chauvinism, nothing like that. It really just means, hey, they are yearning for a desire for a godly man to impact their life. And so I thought that was really revealing, even in the social media circles. How about that?
Absolutely. Well, and just to go off on that for a second, I heard a statistic that 75% of men between 18 and 25 have never asked a woman out one-to-one personally.
Yeah.
75%. Women are dying for men to initiate, to take leadership, to get off the sidelines, to jump in, and to not be a jerk, right? For lack of a better term that you can say on a podcast.
Right.
Nobody wants a chauvinist, like macho guy, but for a man to take leadership, and I'm going to do a whole series on what young fellas need to know, or what men need to know. Basically, how do you act? Yeah. But we're going to do a whole. I might hit you again on best practices of a man and just get really concrete about that.
Well, I think of two things in the Bible, right? So I'm reminded of the book of Ezekiel. There's a segment in there where Ezekiel's praying and he's talking, and the Lord responds and says, I looked for a man to stand in the gap and make up the hedge, but I found none. So as I read that scripture, it hit me one day that you can be a male, but not necessarily be a man biblically. Think about that. Evidently, you can be a male, but not be a man. If God, the creator of all things on this earth, including mankind, is having trouble finding a man, there's some issues there. If God is having trouble finding his own creation, there's issues there. So again, he said he was looking for a man to stand in the gap and make up the hedge so he wouldn't have to punish a nation. It only takes one man. Stand in the gap. Pray. Be that guy. Be that leader. Be countercultural, and you'll be amazed at what God can do with that. And then I think about, the creation story, when the fall happened with Adam and Eve and all that good stuff. Well, I wouldn't say it was good stuff, excuse me, but just, when we read about that account, what we realize is that, at the time that account was written, and as you learn the story, you notice that the enemy came and approached Eve. He didn't go to Adam to try to deceive. He went to the woman. And so when he went to the woman, he was able to convince her that, he was able to ask a lot of questions. Did God say this? Did God say that? I guarantee you, had Adam been there, or maybe had a posture to where he stood there and confronted the enemy's questions, he could have turned the enemy away. He could have said, hey, first of all, like in modern vernacular, this might make somebody who's listening laugh, but in modern vernacular, like where I grew up in Chicago, you approach my woman, like, hello, your game better be tight, because my game is tight, and you approach my woman, that's going to result in some issues,
Right.
So where I'm going with that is that had Adam just been in a posture to cut that off, that could have changed the whole trajectory of how mankind maybe is today. And so, again, men just being in position, being a godly man, stepping up and diverting those types of issues to where they get pulled off legislation, get pulled out of our political circles, it's a game changer. And again, it only takes one man. It doesn't take a group of men. You as a man, hear me, men that are listening to this call, you as a man can make an impact by just yourself. By just being what God has called you to be, you can make an impact. I hope I didn't go on a tangent too much there, Rob.
Preach.
That I'm passionate about.
Awesome. I love it, man. I love it. I mean, the book I first read on this issue, a book by Larry Crabb back in the 80s, best title ever, The Silence of Adam.
Yeah.
Still a great read.
Huge read. Yeah. Great book.
Man, I love it. Absolutely. There's going to be some problems. I mean, there's a reason why when I walk with my wife, and she's a very strong, very independent woman, not a passive bone in her body, but she walking on the outside of the street, I move her to the inside.
Absolutely.
I open her door. I open doors. I stand. I don't sit with my back to the restaurant. I sit facing the restaurant. Like, there are all kinds of things like, and that's just kind of my personality, right? But God has called us not to be passive, not to sit back, but to take leadership. And it doesn't mean I've got to put on my Tristan uniform. I've got to start dressing like Tristan. I got to start acting like him. I'm not from Chicago. I'm from small town Ohio. I'm not a pro athlete. I'm just a broken down dude, man. I'm not fast. I'm slow. I do have great teeth, though. I got great teeth whitening, so I'll take that.
Love it.
But I'll tell you what, man. Here's the point: is that you were not created to be passive. You were created to be a leader the way God has made you. And passive men produce broken cultures. But when men lead with purpose, families, communities, and even cultures change. So, Tristan, I want to ask you, we end every episode this way. It's called our one thing. And that is that this may have been a great conversation to listen to. This may have been a great, there may have been some great points, but what is the one thing that men can take away that they can put in place no matter where they're at in the world? If they're listening in, the UK, if they're listening in Uganda, if they're listening in, China, we have people all over the world who are listening to this, including dude in a cubicle or on a treadmill or whatever. What is one thing that a guy can put in place and take away? What is one thing that you would give guys? You're like, do this, just do this.
Yeah. Well, I think if there's anything I could leave men with, that one thing you're talking about, it would be this: stop waiting. I'll say it again: stop waiting. There's nothing to wait for. And in fact, our time isn't guaranteed on this earth. Life's here today, it's gone tomorrow. Our life is a breath to God. He breathes in, breathes out, life's gone. Stop waiting. I don't think men need permission to be men. Be a man, be yourself. Stop waiting. Take ownership. You don't need clarity. You don't need, I need to make sure that I spend 6 months in doing this before I can. No. There's nothing to wait about. Usually in my experience, and you can read this in the Bible too, if you get started, if you're just willing, he is able. If you are just willing as a man, he is able. Stop waiting. That would be the one thing I would say, Rob. Stop waiting. Stop being passive. You don't need permission. Just be a willing vessel. If you're willing, God is able, and he will bless you to be the man that you're called to be.
Yeah. Tristan, I want to thank you for being part of The Next Stage. It has been an absolute joy talking to you. I love the energy, the life that I've gained just out of talking to you. So thank you for being part of this.
Absolutely, Rob. Thank you for leading into this conversation with me. I know this is not a subject that a lot of people are willing to talk about, and I just thank God that there's men like you and I and others out there that are willing to talk about it on a platform like this. But I think, this really is just the beginning of what God is restoring in men. And unfortunately, I have to say restoring because, I heard Dr. Tony Evans say it this way: the reason why kingdom men have to rise is because kingdom men are missing. Like I said, God's having trouble finding them. So if God's having trouble finding them, you can only imagine what the chaos in our culture looks like. But I'm looking forward to seeing you in November. I think it's going to be a great time. Like I said, it's going to get real. Guys are going to get ministered to. We'll probably get ministered to. And just really seeing men step into ownership is really what this is about. This isn't about, we're better than women. We're better than this. We're better than that. This is about just men being men. This is about men living up to and stepping into the design that God created us to be. And I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. Thanks for being part. I look forward to joining forces with you, shoulder to shoulder with you, anytime, anywhere, man. Let's go. Men, go register for this conference November 12th through 14th. It's a Word of Life Christian Church in Lone Tree, Colorado. And until next time, may you be men of purpose, born out of a deep sense of identity of who you are as a man created in God's image, to lead and not sit back and be passive. Until next time, take care. We'll talk to you soon. Man, there's a loneliness and isolation epidemic going on in our world today. 50% of men report frequent feelings of loneliness. Another 50% report not having any close friends. And 70% of men report not having a significant relationship or a conversation that goes beyond the surface level in the last week. Life doesn't have to be that way. In fact, Sherpa Unlimited has come along and said, we want to help solve that problem. And I want you to picture your world like this. Picture your world where you have other strong men around you who are heading the same direction you are. Not just yes men in your life or drinking buddies or poker playing buddies or something like that, but men where you had the opportunity to grow, to really foster the kind of life that you want, to grow that internal world that allows you to be the man you need to be at work, at home, in your community. Men who are there to challenge you, but also lift you up when you fall, and we all do. I want you to check out Sherpa Unlimited's opportunity that we have coming up. They're called Ascent Men's Communities. These are bi-weekly groups that meet literally anywhere in the world. You have to invest in these. They're not just free, but it's very affordable. You'll see. Less than the cost of a couple pizzas and certainly less than the cost of your gym membership. Go to sherpaunlimited.com/ascent. We'll see you in one of our Ascent Men's Communities very soon.
Does your sermon only get one squeeze? There's probably more juice in that sermon. ReSermon repurposes sermon content for optimal ministry impact. Learn more at resermon.com or email hello@resermon.com.
Thanks for joining us for the Next Stage podcast for men with Rob Stout. The Next Stage helps a man live with purpose, born out of his identity as a man made in God's image. The Next Stage publishes every other Wednesday morning by Sherpa Unlimited Coaching for Men based in Denver. Learn more at sherpaunlimited.com. We love feedback. Please send your feedback, questions, or requests for future content to thenextstage@sherpaunlimited.com. The Next Stage taps the wisdom of the ancient scriptures, and if you don't have a copy of the Bible, you can check one out at your local public library, buy one at your favorite online store, or download what is called the YouVersion app to your smartphone. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again in a couple weeks.